Blog Talk Radio.
Hello, and we are live. We are live. This is Wake Up African People Now. Tonight we're going to be having the one and only Dr. Phil Valentine on the show. And we hope that you all enjoy the show. I am bringing him in now. Dr. Phil, are you on the line?
This is Dr. Valentine. I'm here.
Greetings. How are you?
I'm well, thank you, sister. And yourself?
I'm good. This is Offset, the co-host. Truth Dr. Akbar will be joining us in just a moment here. And we also have the other sister. Did you want to introduce yourself as well?
Hotep, Dr. Valentine. This is Sister Desiree.
Greetings, sister.
Great.
How are you?
I'm great. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
It's really great having you on tonight.
Thank you.
Yes, it is. It is. So, Dr. Phil, definitely we want you to introduce yourself and hopefully I want to hear a little bit about the school that you have, if you don't mind, talking about the classes that you offer. I hear you have a school, and if you don't mind doing that for us as we get ready to start the show, and talk about what you specialize in as well.
Well, I have been a doctor of naturopathic, or what we call classical naturopathy, not the naturopathy that's dealing with integrative medicine and so forth. That is kind of under the medical jurisdiction at this time. I'm also the doctor of classical naturopathy, but focusing primarily on the science of hygienic science. The hygienic science model as resurrected by R.T. Thrall and Sheldon. I am also a doctor of metaphysics. I am also, or have been, focusing in on dealing with different types of occult studies, as well as dealing with what is called metahistory, or metahistory is the history that's behind the history that's given to us. We are, as far as what we do here, we have had the distinction and the pleasure to serve our community by being the first to introduce a vaccination exemption package nearly 27 years ago in New York. And this was geared specifically towards our brothers and sisters, African-American brothers and sisters, who did not have access to that type of legal information and that particular service. A service like that for just one letter from an attorney dealing with vaccination exemption would cost about $750 to $800 just for their time to draw up that letter. But because we studied health and we have studied the laws and so forth, we put together the package that pretty much grew, and we're still doing it now. Of course, they've become more strident with that, and they're trying to clamp down, pretend that the laws don't exist anymore, overriding it with something called executive decisions, which essentially has nothing to do with law. We were the first to introduce the counter question or the counter argument that HIE caused AIDS, and the whole AIDS myth back in 1985. And, of course, people thought we were crazy. We lost a few friends who did not follow us or really believe that we were kind of being irresponsible. But a few years later, of course, we were vindicated, and 500 scientists came out and pretty much said the same thing. Of course, they were Europeans, so that gave it validity. And we have now opened our University of Commission Sciences about 7 years ago And what we were doing at that time was innovative because we turned a technology that at that time was being used only by CEOs of major corporations to talk to their employers or employees around the world. And we used it to be able to reach out to brothers and sisters around the world and to put together a college-level program that even one of my mentors, Dr. Leonard Jeffries, called me to ask us how he would have done that, because they were getting ready to open up a school for boys over in Ghana, dealing with computers school. So we were most people think that we just came out, or we've been, that we just got on the scene. But we've been doing this for about 38 years.
38
Dr.
years.
Valentine. Dr. Valentine.
Yes, sir.
Can you hear me? This is the truth, doctor. I had a little technical difficulties going on this side. I wanted to ask you about the homosexual epidemic and the drug that I heard you talk about called poppers, and how that facilitated the AIDS epidemic.
Well, there was a book that came out. One book was written by one of my teachers, who has since suspiciously died in a hospital because he would never have gone to a hospital. And he wrote a book called The Great AIDS Hoax. His name was T.C. Fry. Another great book that was written called by Marvin Cicero. He wrote something called The AIDS Indictment, which again substantiated that HIV/AIDS actually was caused by drugs or some kind of chemical, not HIV, but the AIDS itself, that HIV cannot take you into the AIDS disease or that debilitating disease, AIDS. The only thing that could do that is drugs or some kind of chemical poison being introduced into the system. Well, that's what was happening back in the early 70s when a chemist, and I don't want to get too deeply involved in that, but when a chemist began to use a non-regulated part of the amyl nitrate or the nitrate families. Nitrites are deadly cancer causes. We know that. Well, there are two different nitrites that were used in a medicinal way, and that is for angina heart patients. And the amyl nitrate was what the FDA began to regulate. But its cousin, butyl nitrate, which had the same kind of effect, was not. Well, it seems that a chemist who was also a homosexual essentially took that and ran with it since it was unregulated and made a very big business out of it. It was called poppers. And they were called different names. They were called air fresheners, but they didn't smell like air fresheners. They smelled like old gym socks. But he got away with selling them in the form of ampules. These ampules, you'd snap these ampules, and a gas would come out in the form of the butyl nitrate, and you would inhale it. And what it would do is it would give you an immediate rush, and that rush would then turn into the euphoria. But what was most advantageous to the homosexual community was that some of its side effects was that it loosened the sphincter muscles of the anus. So this, of course, blew up all over California, and then it was migrated over here into New York. And if you followed the use of it for the 7 years brings you into the 1976, when 1976, 77, 78, went all the way up through 1984 when they first made the announcement. If you were to follow the medical statistics of the homosexual community that were coming in with a certain type of syndrome that they called GRID, gay-related immunodeficiency syndrome, that was hitting mostly the homosexual community because it was they using this. And a lot of the records, when they came in, and the diagnostics and part of the things that the patients were telling to the doctors was that they had anywhere between 500 and 2,000 sexual partners, one person. So over this period of time, they began to use that as a premise, not to warn us about what HIV would do, because HIV would never cause AIDS. HIV is innocuous. It has all these different ways that it can become sicknesses to you. It's the first disease that had 25 different causes. And nobody could isolate the HIV. They lie when they tell you they did. And if they did isolate it, they created something and said that was what HIV is. No one has ever isolated HIV. That's why you have to take 3 different tests. Not one test can give you that. You have to take the ELISA, the Western blot, and all the rest of the little spectrums. And inside the package, if you read the package, it says, inside of the Western blot, it says this particular test is not one that you could take. I'm paraphrasing now. Is one that does not is not a credible source to give you an accurate reading for whether this person has HIV. And, of course, the HIV criteria here in the West versus the one that's in Africa is completely different. The symptoms of malnutrition could give you an HIV reading over there. And over here, of course, it's the same thing, but high drugs or a woman who has had 3 or more babies could get a positive reading.
Well, doctor, explain the false positives, because I've heard someone talk about false positive tests they be giving black people, and then the medicine itself that they give them is what takes them out. Can you explain that?
Well, false positives can come if you've had pneumonia, for instance, if you've had the flu. That's what they did with Magic Johnson. He had come off of at least 2 to 3 weeks of suffering with double pneumonia. Then they took the blood test, and, of course, he had HIV after that. So there are many things in the HIV test itself is so ridiculous. We had a immunologist and a microbiologist who came clean, gentleman who studied in Columbia, very, very astute doctor, very, very on it. And he said something very interesting. He said that if you took the blood neat, which means if you didn't, dilute the blood, and you had to dilute the blood some 300 to 800 times before you actually gave the test. In other words, if you gave the same HIV tests to neat blood, everybody would have HIV. So what they had to do is something that they never did before, and that is to dilute the blood some 200 to 300 to 400 times and then give it the test. That was the way that they came to their positive. Because they said they were finding, it had to be a unique way of finding this new kind of disease, which is ridiculous. And so the markers in the body could have been from anything. You could eat a side of pork. And, of course, what happens is pork can change your entire bloodstream so that if you were to take a blood test after eating a large pork dinner, it would look like you had leukemia. So it's interesting too. Yeah. So it's interesting too also that the exact opposite to the medical criteria itself for what constitutes a disease was what brought in AIDS. And you have to remember, AIDS came in as a political disease. It was one of those boardroom diseases that the cancer industry did in order to save its funding, because that's when Reagan was deregulating the cancer industry. So if you were to look at everything that started the AIDS industry, you'll see that the cancer industry took all of their medicines, all of the drugs, their experiments, even the doctors, and brought lock, stock, and barrel into the AIDS industry. In fact, the very first thing that they used, AZT, was actually an old experimental cancer drug, which they found was so deadly they didn't even put a patent to it. But that's what they were giving they gave that to the first people that they were dealing with as far as the AIDS epidemic was, so that they can drive home the lethality. That's the time when they started really promoting that. That was the 9/11 for the AIDS
epidemic. In other words, you needed to shock the people. So they showed you a lot of people dying on AZT because they were actually killing them in front of your eyes. So that you could think that it was the AIDS that was actually causing it and that HIV was causing it. And it's a lie. Because if you were to go in and get an HIV classification right now, you'd be worth something like $120,000.
So it's all the medical industry really creating diseases to create monies.
Yes.
It's one more. I'm going to ask you two more questions, and I'm going to pass off to my one of my hosts, Queen Desiree Chachette Terry. I want to ask you about a brother that nobody never talks about before. I accessed some of his work in the 90s, and I don't know if you know him. He was a researcher that turned into an AIDS researcher. Matter of fact, I think he might have been architect or something, but he was a very smart brother named Zeal Myers.
What was his name, sorry?
Dr. Zeal Myers. And I hope I'm saying his name. Yeah.
No, all of the people that came in afterwards came in after me, actually. I did not, I don't know most of the people. I came out with a premise, and I just began to take the evidence and the experimentations and research of others who actually followed suit. But what I came out with, the person that came out concurrent with me to also that I studied was Dr. Peter Duesberg. And he was a Nobel laureate. In fact, he was the student of a Nobel laureate.
Well, this is the last question that I'm going to ask you before I pass off to my co-host. The World Trade Center explosion. I've seen a tape that you made. I believe it was in right after the explosion that showed that this thing was a missile, and then later on down the line, I don't know if they came out before you, but I've never seen it. These white guys came out with this thing called loose change, and I want you to talk about that. Who was first to bring this information? You out, them or the white boys?
Well,
you are the white boys.
I tell you, I don't know anything about them. Loose change came out about 8-9 years after that. I don't know anything. I knew about loose change only recently, and they came out in the late 90s. I had postulated, I mean, not the late 90s, I'm talking about the late 2000s. They came out about 2006, 8, 9, or something like around that time. I did this in December of 2001, 3 months after.
Yeah.
So I had documented film from the Spanish channels. It was a Spanish channel called Hoy. And I had a good friend of mine who knew one of the cameramen there that had some of the unedited film before the government had gotten to that station. They got to CBS, NBC, and ABC, and that's why when you see all these great disasters that are staged by the government and by the secret government, you have to look at the first reporting, because then they have to clean up what the reporters get in the cameras, and then if you can keep that stock, then you'll see all of the ways that they orchestrated it. Well, in Hoy, they did not edit anything. In Hoy, they were showing you the bodies hitting the streets. So she had gotten all this footage from Hoy, and I was fortunate enough to have it. And I was the one that was showing that there were charges that were actually going off as the buildings were coming down.
Yeah, I remember.
Yeah, I mean it's on the tape. I was the first. Well, I don't really know about anything as far as the first. I know the first in my community, the African American community, the melanated communities. I know I was the first to come out with the posture that it was a drone. From my end, there were probably a lot in the white community saying the same thing from underground. But Loose Change just took all of it and had gotten their group together. By that time, there was more suspicion around that event, and there was more people supporting them. Well, me, I just had a little bit of tape and what I saw and what I could imagine and how it was probably executed. But it was done ingeniously. It It was remote controlled. The people were disappeared, just like Flight 347, I think was the one from out of, was this one that just disappeared off of Indian Ocean? They had to cover up this ground. Yes. Malaysian flight. And I mean, they can do this. They could take over the plane at any time. And crash it in the mountains anytime they want to. But, I mean, it was just common sense to me to watch how the news footage were unfolding everything. And all I did was just say, look, this doesn't look like what CBS, NBC is saying, and take a look at these pictures and these films. And then I did my mining at the time with a little bit of expertise I had on the web, because I'm not very good with that, and came up with some information from other researchers that were actually pretty much had the same type of suspicion that I did. But I know for a fact that I know my videos probably hit the streets much earlier than anybody else's regarding the fact that this was all staged.
Yes, because I remember when that Loose Change came out, I was telling everybody Dr. Phil Ben said that. I would like to know if that tape, because I think people should actually buy it from you, because it's actually historic, this tape here. I mean, it's actually should be a collector's item, because you first came out. Far as I'm concerned, you were the first person that I heard when that World Trade Center went down. But I had a cousin that was in the first blast, but they never got paid. That's when they blamed the blind man, the blind sheik. Yeah, and they were, believe they were weakening the structure then. You know what I'm saying? But this is very, very, very mysterious. So, Queen Desiree, I got to let her on in because we don't have much time with you.
That's fine. Oh, okay. Doctor, can you explain what is metaphysics, just in case someone's listening that really need an understanding of what that is?
By all means. Metaphysics is a word. It has a Greek foundation, meta meaning beyond, physics meaning that which is tangible to the senses, beyond the senses, or that which is what we call cause versus effect, the study of cause versus the description of effects. It's the speaking to or finding or learning the language of how to circumscribe or how to define something that is invisible, that you have to decode the effects to give you an idea of what possibly the cause could be, because the cause and effect are actually the same. It's just that the effects may look like a different language altogether from the cause. And so once you understand the language of cause, then you can decode the language of effects. Most people have been trained to just give a word to effects. So most of our experiences is just about describing surfaces or just putting words that have been indoctrinated into us so that we have a common language for describing our reality. But the true reality is behind everything that we perceive. All of this is illusion. It's terminal. So metaphysics studies that. Metaphysics also studies thought, which essentially is the foundational energy that creates all living things, that creates all created things. So we deal with the science of thought as well. And in our university, we teach a language that circumscribes the invisible realm, the causal plane, and then gives attention to what we call the observer, and shows that thought is not intelligence, and that thought is something distinct. It's a mechanical part of the operation of our brain. And once we understand how that mechanical part of our brain can trap us into believing that we are dealing with a reality and can make us do things and cause us to have certain symptoms and lead to diseases, then people understand how their thoughts are ruling them rather than they essentially having control over their thoughts.
Okay. So how can you apply metaphysics with the spiritual world?
Metaphysics would be the language of the spiritual world.
Okay. Okay.
It would be the way that you decode what the spirit is saying. A lot of people say, well, that's the spirit. And of course, but then what is that? You see, and what is the defining mechanism in our brain that makes us contact and recognize the spirit world when it expresses itself to us? Most of us don't even know what the spirit world is. In fact, this is the spirit world, but it's actually condensed. It's solidified. Spirit and matter are the same. They're just vibrating on different frequencies.
Okay. I listen to a lot of your speeches, and you talk about food and how it affects, how certain foods affect our bodies. Can you talk about how does the shape of our food correspond to different parts of our body?
The shapes of our food? You're talking about like how the tubers may look like our kidneys, or for instance, one of the tubers, one of the sweet potatoes looks like a pancreas. That's what you're talking about?
Yeah.
It looks like a pancreas. Yeah. The Creator knows, because what it's called simulacra. And a simulacra means it's similar to it. Nature essentially gives us our thoughts back. It reverberates and gives us our thoughts back to us. And because the human thought spectrum has become so complicated and dense, there's no more free air, so to speak. It's just completely cluttered with pain, suffering, anger, ambition, and everything like that. The universe essentially keeps giving us feedback about how connected we are to the world and how the world is connected to us. So we may find that there are different parts of our body and different shapes to our organs that show up in the things that we need for just those things, for just those parts of our body.
Okay. And since we're talking about food, today, a lot of things have chemicals in it, GMOs and things like that. Is there a way that we can buy our food without, do you know of any way we can, buy our food without all those chemicals in it, where to get it from?
Yeah, you have to buy organic, or you grow it yourself in an organic soil. And that's what my wife and I do. We have the tower gardens that we sell, and these can be grown in urban environments as well as anywhere else. And it's best to grow it. It's aeroponic. It grows on air and a little water. The root system is just bathed in a little water, but mostly aeroponic is just air. And because the roots are aeriferously given a lot of oxygen, these things grow out to be strong and fat, and we just go and we harvest what we want from these towers. Going to shop organic is good. We go to Whole Foods, but I know it could become very expensive, which is why we promote a product called Juice Plus. Juice Plus is non-GMO, and it's non-pesticides. The standard order is fruit and vegetable, and the capsules contain 15 fruits and vegetables, along with 2 grains. If you want to get the extended order, there are 25 fruits, vegetables, and berries. And now, even I don't have 15 fruits and vegetables every day. So what we do is, because our society and the topsoil and everything has just become so bereft of the natural ingredients, we make sure that we promote only the best to our brothers and sisters. And when we found out about Juice Plus, I found out that one of my herbal teachers was the man who put together the formula itself. So I went and investigated it for about a year, took it for a year, and now we have been promoting it. So organic fruits, we say that the Juice Plus is the next best thing to fruits and vegetables. But we don't say that you stop taking fruits and vegetables just taking Juice Plus. No. This is to support what you don't get, because even though I would say and recommend take organic fruits and vegetables, sometimes you have to be mindful of the fact that most of our fruits and vegetables, for them to have a shelf life, they're picked early. When you pick it early, at least 75 to 80% of the nutrients that would be in the fruit at the point of ripening never arrives there. So when you're ripening fruits and vegetables on the shelf, you're not getting most of what that fruit and vegetable is supposed to yield to you. So that's why we promote the Juice Plus, because it then supports good, healthy eating and living habits.
Okay. I have another question. I noticed that today in society there are many rituals going on, like, rituals they perform for weddings, your everyday rituals. As Africans, what kind of rituals should we be practicing today?
Well, the ritual of reading would start it off first. A lot of our brothers and sisters are only now getting into what reading really is about. Of course, we don't want to start our children off too early into reading, but we do want to give them the story the way our ancestors did through the griot. But I believe teaching our children a healthy reading habit, instead of also eating habits, they should have a healthy reading habit, and give them the books by our teachers. Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, Dr. Van Sertova, Dr. James, Dr. who's the brother who did Destruction of African Civilization, Chancellor Williams. These are the masters that gave us, the foundations to our civilizations and what we did. And, of course, then they're the teachers who teach the metaphysics of African spirituality, which has now become the New Age, and begin to reassociate all of what they talk about, astrology, numerology, physics, botany, and all the different sciences, back to ancient Kemet, back to the Indus Valley civilizations, back to the Monomotapa Empire, back to Kush, where it all began. So these are the things that nurture our healthy children, and spending time. Because remember, the problems of children only grow when they grow. So what you have to do is to give that child a healthy foundation and have that person loving, have that little person loving to know about his or herself and taking pride in herself. Stop these little girls wanting to look like this ridiculous Beyonce and the rest of these clowns that they put up there as commercial bait to get our children to think that they must look like these creatures. Give children pride in themselves, their individuality, especially as their racial pride and their ethnic pride and their cultural pride. Once you instill that in them, no matter how far they drift, they always come back to port, because that's the healthy foundation that they have.
Okay. Brother Akbar, you have any questions?
Yes. Yes, Doctor. What do you think is attributing to the European negative birth rate? They're estimating, I believe I seen, by the year 2026 that the Scandinavian type will be extinct. What is your opinion on why is this happening?
Well, there's a war going on right now, and of course I'm taking this information from research that I've had. There's a war going on between that faction of humanity and what we call the Semites, in the form of the Zionists. They control the school system, they control the medical system, they control the media, and they have been trying to merge the Neanderthal with the Africoid and the archetypal humans for a while. That's why you see it all over television with all this nonsense like, what is that, Scandal and all the rest of that, promoting that garbage. Mm-hmm. What it is to essentially there is a genetic war being conducted. And what they do want to do is to wipe out the hold that the Nordic European has on the planet based upon all the years of war that they've been waging from that continent, using, the techniques that were taught to them by the Moors to make war. They never had a culture that ascended beyond Kemet. They've pretty much taken all the cultures and adapted it, thrown everybody. It's like having somebody who has a house and being evicted from that house, and the person living in it believes that they're the ones that built it because they told their children that. And essentially most of what you're seeing in the form of sciences and things of that nature were actually in place before they came and invaded. So essentially there is a war going on. We don't know that because as black people we believe everybody that looks white is our enemy. But there are different little subtle parts of this war that's going on between black and white that a lot of people are unaware of, most people don't know about. So you could also see it in the fact that, when you see the birth rate going down that way, you're looking at either one of the greatest forms of misinformation putting out there so that they can get the whites to maintain a kind of hostile edge so that they can survive. Because, of course, you know that being the recessive, they could be essentially and indelicately screwed out of existence, and they know that. So they've created.
Doctor, I'm sorry to interrupt you, but why would they be promoting assimilation and then promoting not to assimilate all at the same time?
They're not promoting assimilation. It's the Jews that's promoting assimilation.
Oh, okay.
And of course the Jews say, oh, that's anti-Semitic. Well, I'm Semitic. I'm semi-black, semi-white myself. And it's not the Jew that we talk about, the Jew, because a lot of them are just as clueless as most of us as black folks. It's the Zionist brain thrust working out of the Vatican, and they've already taken over the Vatican, and they're pretty much operating it from inside there. But, like I said, you could sit back, take a look at the way things are going, and even this discussion here really isn't going to have any impact on what's actually already started. There is a gigantic boulder rolling downhill, and there's nothing going to stop it until it stops, and that's when it gets to the bottom. So right now what we're doing is just kind of like a reporter doing the blow-by-blow.
Mm. So you're saying that it's a subtle war between blacks and whites. Where would that war be being waged at?
Well, it's not a subtle war between blacks and whites. It's a subtle war between the Jews and the whites. Blacks is all out and overt. And, of course, the Jew wants supremacy. That's what he says. And some say, well, it's not the Jew because it's a lie. It could be to play the Hegelian dialectic problem, reaction, solution. It's the Vatican that's actually playing it off that the Jews are the bad guys. Well, the Zionists have always aligned themselves with the dictators and with the massacres and the genocidists. So there must be some kind of agenda there because they themselves say that they will back the black man. They'll give him. He's the one. In fact, he was the one that actually started the integrationist movement. It was the Jew. Most people don't know that. And, of course, the Vatican had a part to do with that as well. They were already infiltrated into there. The Jew actually was the one who backed Martin Luther King and all of them because how you think most of them got on the air? The Jews were running that.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, how would you just take a camera and see all these black people on Washington and to take the camera right out there? They were watching all of the discord and the madness that they were creating. You have to remember that black people were creating a competition base that was going to be par excellence, bar none. We had a Wall Street that was just as effective as any of the Wall Streets they had, and it was growing. Our credibility, because we had the skilled labor from so-called slave days, we were the ones doing all the work, so we were the ones who knew how to build a society. They didn't. That's why the unions were created up north, because all the black skilled labor was coming up north after in the Reconstruction period, and so the Polacks and the Irish and the Nordics and the whites and the Italians all said, well, listen, we can't fight with one another too much. We got to come together. That's when Lucky Luciano along and said, listen, we got to stop fighting, boy. Yeah, it was the blacks who were coming up. and bringing all that skilled labor up north, and then they had to create the unions. And the unions were actually created. All of the ACLU and all these, not the ACLU, but the truckers unions and all these white unions. They were there to make sure that black people didn't get in to get these jobs. They were there to secure jobs for whites and semi-whites.
Well, I'm going to ask you a question that I asked Dr. Umar about hidden colors. Did you think, or did you know that this was going to take off the way it took off?
I was one of the first ones that Brother Tariq Nasheed called, and he said, listen, Dr. Valentine, I got a plan. I wanted to do something to give back to the community because, he was into all that, how to get girls and, how to dress like a Mac and all of this type of stuff.
Yeah.
So he's like a video Malcolm, when he was instead of being, he was Malcolm Little in the streets, Detroit Red of the hip hop generation. But then he said to me, he said, listen, we think that you have something to say. We've been checking your videos. We think you have something to say to the brothers and sisters, and we would like you to join us on this endeavor. And I said, oh, great. So they came by the home, at the house, and that's where you saw the first interview of one of our previous houses. And then the second one, they came here again, and to when we had moved. And then the third one that's coming out, I had to fly to California, and we did it out there.
Okay. Yeah, so, it really has hit the mainstream. A lot of people on my sites, because I have 10,000 members in my group on Facebook, and then I have 5,000 on one page and a couple thousand on another page are coming to me, telling me that, hidden colors, they're showing their parents, they're showing friends, they throwing little hidden color parties where they're bringing their friends over to their house. I think this is the most dynamic video that is hit and went a little bit more mainstream than I'm usually used to seeing our scholars and stuff put out. Could that
it's
be
in schools
that
now, actually. It's in schools now. I've been told that white teachers who are teaching black history essentially are teaching it to white students now in the universities.
Well, maybe they're trying to correct all the academic racism that was created to, keep our people dumb and blind.
They have no choice now. They have no choice because of the work of Dr. Clark. You have no idea that during the early 90s, what Dr. Ben, Dr. Clark, and what those incredible master teachers did to awaken black consciousness. And what it did was it brought so much scholarly work to the fore and introduced us to so many scholars that we didn't know about, J.A. Rogers and all of the master teachers that were out there back in the day. Also, what's her name who wrote the wonderful Ethiopians? We didn't know anything about
Priscilla Dungy Houston.
Yes, Mama Houston, and this was their work. Whites are not doing anything but following and copying like they always have. It's always the innovators versus the imitators, and it's the imitators who have the resources to look like the innovators, and they're not. So the fact of the matter is, what Hidden Colors is for this generation is what our master teachers, like Dr. Ben, was for our generation.
Yes, the first master teacher that woke me up was Chancellor Williams in 1976. Chancellor Williams. I got a hold of his book. I was in middle school. My brother brought it home from, he had Black Studies in Rutgers University. And I kidnapped the book, and I've never been the same since. And, these master teachers, they don't get the credit that they very deserve. We should have holidays for them. It should be nobody should go to work or anything or do anything. Or even on their birthday, have at least an hour of silence across the country, anybody that knows about them, because they went through hell. George G.M. James shot down. Dr. George Jackson died disgruntledly because he didn't believe that his work was affecting the people. But they didn't live to see all the filtration of their work. You know, and when I speak about these great master teachers, I know they are with and very well receptive into the realm of their ancestors. You know, because if it wasn't for them, a lot of us would not even have our right minds or be on the journey towards getting our right minds back.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, of course, we have our sisters like Dr. Marimba Ani, who was also teaching there at Rutgers University because she was a student of Dr. John Henry Clark. Yes. And also you have Dr. Frances Cress Welsing, master scholar.
The first lady wrote the Yurugu, right?
Yes, she did.
Yurugu.
Yeah, she wrote Yurugu and introduced us to the Dogon principle of the Yurugu and who that Yurugu was and what that spirit was that he carried. But, I give all praises to our master teachers. And when I approached my master teachers, I told them, I said, listen, we know about the physical attributes. We know what they did and accomplished. But what were the people that actually were? You're not speaking of the psychology of these people. What was it that they knew? What was the metaphysics of their mind? And that's where my generation then took the baton from our master teachers, and I started the Metaphysical Underground, which became known today as the Conscious Community. Myself, Bobby Hemmett, and Dr. Delbert Blair, and another brother Brother Jamal out in the West Coast. We became sort of like the founding fathers. We were just kind of underground. Nobody knew about us, but thank goodness for people like Sister Bert Hatshepsut, who she started making it the VCRs. That began going around, and then we had a store down there in Atlanta called Black Media by Sister Uma. She began pushing these tapes, and then before we knew it, the underground metaphysical community began to go viral. And what young people call the conscious community today.
Let's not forget Dr. Bobby Wright, R.I.P.
Yeah.
And it was another brother. It was another brother who wrote this book called The Negro Factory. What was his name?
Well, no. You're not dealing in metaphysics here. We're not dealing in that. That was the nationalist foundation upon which the metaphysical community was dealing. I'm not talking about that. I'm speaking about the ones who are dealing with the high sciences, the metaphysics, like C. Freeman L. These were the foundation. These were the founding fathers of the metaphysical sciences community.
Wonderful, Sister Aset. Do you have any questions for Doctor? Or we're going to let some callers in. Are there any callers in queue?
We do have callers in queue. We're having some technical difficulties. I have to actually call the callers.
I'd be glad when they get this blog talk stuff, science of it better.
I think what it is, you better tell them that they're being called.
They don't know they're being called. I'm going to say that I'm calling them first. I should have did that. Stop.
They may be holding on, thinking that...
Caller 917, area code 917. We are trying to get you on the line. If you would please answer your phone. I see you in queue.
You might want to give them the first three, the phone letters, 917, and give them the first three numbers.
586. 917 586.
Maybe they don't want to talk.
Going to the next one. Okay, caller with area code 718-813. We are trying to get you on the line. Give us just a moment.
Sorry, the number you have reached not in service. Please check the number.
Did I dial the right number? Yeah, so they sent me an email. We're having issues with the guest lines.
Okay, well, let's proceed with the questions. Sister Desiree, do you have any more questions? Sister Desiree.
I don't think she does. I have a question.
Go ahead.
Dr. Phil, I just want to ask, it's a saying that children and elders have the closest connection to the spirit world. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah,
and why?
My grandmother used to say that one's entering, the other's leaving, and it's as if one just get off the plane and one's about to get on the plane. It's an interesting cycle, that the connection to our elders, because there is a resolve that one reaches when a certain level has reached in their minds. It's a resolve in the mind that the elders achieve. And then there's an anticipation for life once the young people come back. And so when babies come, they say they're playing with angels. When the elders go into their own state of delirium or retreat from the world, and they say they're going to actually play with those angels before they appear here in the body and in the flesh, or when before the babies take flesh. That's why in African tradition, they used to take the baby that was just born and go to the elder, especially the reader, a woman or the man, and then they would tell you which one of the ancestors that came back, and even tell you and read based on the stars what that child would do.
Oh, amazing. That's amazing. I also want to ask, what role do you think religion plays on children and their spirituality? Since they are so connected to the spiritual world, what role do you think religion plays in suppressing that, so to speak?
I don't know. I think religion invades a very virgin space. We call it the imagination. And that's why children love stories, because it is in the imagination that the child gets to exercise the creative processes of thought, to learn all. When a child is exercising the creative processes of thought, there are no boundaries. Of course, as we become adults, we go constricted by boundaries, that our thinking is based on boundaries, whereas a child, there are no boundaries. So that's why the Bible says you must be as little children to enter the kingdom. That's because there is no boundaries. There are no, one does not have any kind of second agenda. A child just plays. Play is, for a child, is employment. That's how they work. Work and play for children is employment. And what it does is it begins to nurture their creative ability. They begin to take the things that are around them and to nurture what's in them by what they see and perceive of outside. We step in and we begin to put little dolls and Pokemons inside of that space so that we begin to commercialize the space. It's like a child's furtive imagination is a beautiful scenery, and just imagine that furtive space of imagination now has all these signposts and things, placards that you see and you read, all these posters along the streets, and all of them have been placed in there by Disney and all this Mary Had a Little Lamb crap that they keep putting into our children's heads. And of course, all of them look like little white children. And if you look at the cartoons, a number of little white children. I don't know why black parents are taking their children to watch these Disney movies, especially Pixar's. All these little blonde, little white children and little redhead little children, and everybody is warriors and all this kind of crap. Got the girls wanting to do what the boys do, and the boys doing what the girls do now. I mean, they're really screwing it up. And Disney and these types of programming instruments are actually conditioning our children away from their natural states into all these aberrant behaviorisms that are being nurtured at a young age so that they think it's normal and natural. So what you feed your child essentially becomes the foundation of their imagination. And it could be either invested with horror, it could be invested with hope, it could be invested with potential, or it could be invested with limitation. And essentially that's all they've been doing is actually plowing the field of our children and planting their own seeds in that field. And that's what's wrong with what you're doing, with giving our children over for that invasive process we call education.
Oh, wow. Amazing.
Yeah, it is. I have another question for you. Can you explain the shift of the earth that we're in right now that happened? I guess it happened, a couple of months ago, I think, when the earth shifted. And can you explain that to us and what that means to us?
Well, it was a magnetic shift of the sun. The sun, I think, shifted its magnetic field, and I believe it shifted by 19 degrees. The Earth's magnetic field is being shifted. The Earth itself is not shifting. There is a change in the rotational part of the planet where we might end up going retrograde for 3 days before we get back to our spin. That's the way that the Earth itself jump-starts itself every 13,000 years. And we are in a cycle right now where the Earth is going through that. And we are being pulled, of course, into so many different areas. We are made to believe that somehow Hubble, which they shut down, or these other satellites that they have up there, is somehow just standing in one place, looking out, and because we're getting better technology, we're beginning to see more planets, livable planets, and solar systems and universe, galaxies. But that's a lie. We are actually moving into other neighborhoods, and I spoke on this in a lecture I did called Hyperdimensional Warfare, where I said that we are actually moving. The sun is actually dragging us in its own orbit around a larger sun, and we are being pulled through different pathways, and we're not standing still inside of a revolving place. We're actually traveling in a geocentric or a solar, galactocentric orbit around a central sun. And what we are doing is coming into the neighborhoods of all these entities. This is why you're seeing all these so-called saucers, and that they're supposed to be in 2018 a disclosure of the fact that we have been under the auspices of aliens running our governments and this kind of stuff. And this is what the UFO conference is, what we're doing coming up on the 27th is going to be all about. So the Earth the Earth changes its magnetic field every 13,000 years, and I believe that we went into that sometime around 2004. I'm not sure. It may have been even 2012, but I don't have the exact date.
So, Doctor, I'm sorry, Sister, I just want to ask them this one question. So is this dragging the Earth through these different dimensions or different areas of space the same thing as going into the age of Aquarius and the different ages?
It's what we call the precession of the equinoxes. We are entering the age of Hapi. That wasn't called Aquarius until after the Greeks. But the age of Hapi, with the Nile River flowing, the same as you see with Aquarius, Hapi is the name of the Nile, actually. So we're in the age of the Nile. And in the age of Aquarius, in accordance with their age, that's the age of the homosexual in the first stages. before it becomes a normalizing of the yin and yang powers, they say. But if you look at the story of Aquarius, it's the story of Ganymede. Ganymede was the son of a Trojan general who was kidnapped while he was tending the flock in the field. He was kidnapped by Zeus, who turned into a giant eagle, snatched the young boy up, who was about 13, 14, or 15, and raped him repeatedly up in Olympus. And then he turned him out all to the rest of the gods, and I guess they had so much favor with him that Zeus made him the cupbearer for the gods. And if you look at Ganymede, which is associated with Aquarius, he is the little homosexual boy. Of course, the Greeks were into all of that pedophilia with these young boys. And at that time, I did a lecture where I showed that these pimp cups came out, and everybody had these bejeweled cups. And that's when it came out also that the so-called rap community, who had all this pimp cup stuff, starting with what's his name out there, and now he's Fire Lion or whatever his name is now. But back when they were pushing the pimp cup, they were pushing the Ganymede energy, and now we come to find out that most of these rappers are bisexual and pretty much just outright homosexual.
Yeah, that's a real epidemic nowadays. So the same Ganymede you're talking about is when they say that in the Bible, when Jesus says that his disciples asked him when will they see him again, they said, well, you will see a man in the city carrying a cauldron of water. Follow him into the next house.
Right, and that's the transit. That's the transit from the age of Pisces into the age of Aquarius.
Yeah. Go ahead, Sister Desiree.
Actually, you asked them the same thing I was, but I do have something else. I don't know if you could speak on this or not, but lately they have been finding, black people without their organs and things like that. Do you know anything about that and what's going on?
It's ritualistic, of course. At that time, we saw this same thing happen down in Atlanta, the so-called Atlanta murders that they blamed that black man for, and it was not. The Klan was part of that. And it had to do with the study of melanin and the tincturing of melanin for age reversal. We're not sure what this particular one is for, but we do know that the black male organ is very powerful in sorcery, white sorcery. I'm not talking about white sorcery based upon good Gandalf kind of bull. I'm talking about white people, the so-called the phony pseudo-Illuminati, because we were the original Illuminati. But most of it is is ritualistic, and of course, the European being very, very self-conscious about the black male organ. The fact of the matter is that is the weapon, as Dr. Kress has so eloquently said, that would put him out of existence. So he attacks that as a vicarious, as a kind of vicarious enemy. The black man's prowess is his, so he has to develop technologies to help him against the organic one-to-one mating of white and black on the same level, on the same peers, with the same strength, same they would not win.
Wow. So you mentioned melanin. They have a pill, but that's out. But the Food and Drug Administration has not approved it here yet. But I think it's over in Europe somewhere, in London. I think it's called melatoma, a pill that darkens the skin. Is it possible that they could be?
It was called back in the 50s Surulin. There was a movie out that came called Black Like Me.
Oh, I saw that.
They were talking about it. And the substance is called Surulin. I believe I might be paraphrasing it, but I may not be pronouncing it correctly. But the substance is Surulin. It will turn temporarily, of course,
a white man and blonde hair into a person dark, tawny, or even dark to black, dark brown. They look weird. They look crazy and alien when it does. But they've been doing that for a while. They've been studying melanin since 1939. In 1939, they even erected universities around it in Germany. And right after the war, they were holding melanin conferences back in the late 40s. So you can imagine, here we are getting ready to put together melanin conferences, and you have these idiots on YouTube and these places talking about racists and do all these. Well, why is it that white people study melanin so much in their own colleges?
So is it possible that, I know they have a calcified pineal gland, right?
Yes, calcification is highest amongst Caucasians then comes so-called Asians, and then, of course, Africans. We call black Africans have a 15% calcification rate. Asians are up around 30 to 40 to 50%, and Europeans, Caucasians are 80% and higher.
Is there a way that we can uncalcify our pineal gland? There's certain things that we can do.
Yeah, there are pineal cleansers. I mean, fasting does it, making sure you don't drink chlorinated or fluorinated water. Fluorinated water is one of the number one causes of what we call pineal calcification. And it's not calcification where you see, like the big chunk of calcium covers it. It's not like that. Calcification of the pineal turns the pineal flaccid, in fact. It covers it with a kind of oxide and makes it slimy. That's what calcification is. It covers it over, and so it doesn't pick up the higher frequencies because of that calcification. There is a different crystallization. There's a difference between calcification and crystallization. Crystallization is what the pineal does. Pineal is shaped like a penis, and it needs to be hard in order to actually, that's when you're raising kundalini. That's the same thing, like when they talk about as above, so below. Well, the penis gets hard to create and to bring ecstasy and to open up doors of ecstasy to bliss down on the earth, the physical, to give you that vicarious feeling. Whereas in the head, the pineal, as the penis, opens up doorways to bliss on a whole other level.
So, Dr. Phil, I want to ask you this question. Is it true, I've heard it many times before, that white people with the calcified pineal gland cannot astral project into the next paradigm?
Well, some of them can artificially do it. That's why they're so caught up in LSD. That's where Timothy Leary came to solve that problem for them and began to experiment mostly with the LSD, lysergic acid, and other forms, mushrooms and mescaline and the peyote and all the things that they learned from the indigenous peoples. The other one now is the ayahuasca, that part of the coffee genus of the plant, mixed with another bush herb that gives you that kick of serotonin. That there are certain kinds of I don't have the name themselves right now, but there are certain hallucinogens that the brain creates in order to help the pineal to destabilize the solidity of the physical world so that you could get into the fourth, to pass through the fourth into fifth and sixth dimensions, and to look at the world differently, because your brain constantly tries to organize the world for you. Well, these chemicals disorganizes this world so you could see the next world.
Well, what I was talking about by going into the next paradigm, I'm talking about afterlife. I'm talking about the duat, going to the underworld.
I don't understand. What do you? I'm not sure what you mean.
When you meet Osar, right, and you go to the underworld, are whites unable to do that because they have no pineal gland? I've heard this before from some people teaching.
Well, there are many different ways that you could say that they have calcified pineal glands and cannot interface with spirituality, and therefore their lack of melanin cuts them off or makes them less empathetic to the higher energy frequencies, which it does. That's why they're so caught up in their technology and this so-called cyber enhancement, and they're using technologies to boost their lack of melanin so that they can have an artificial experience of spirituality, one that comes from technology taking them to that space rather than them raising what is intrinsic to themselves and then bring themselves the way the ancient yogis and the African spiritualists and what we did during dances and voodoo and that used to give us our third eye experience, our first eye experience. So as far as Asar and going through the underworld into the Wat and into Amenti, all of these are actually the, you are Asar. You are everything that the stories of all the different characters that are played in the Pantheon is you, and all the different aspects and parts that you play while you are taking this journey called life.
Okay. All right, Sister Desiree. No, I don't know if she has another question.
What time is it now?
I think we are.
It is 9:47. I think we've reached our hour mark. It is now 9:47 Eastern Standard Time. We passed.
Thank you, Doc, for staying a little bit longer with us, and thank you for coming on. Wake Up African People, and I hope that we can have you on again in the future. And thank you for giving us that heavy knowledge, and I hope that all the people hear it. And I do recommend, what's the name of that tape that you made about the building, the World Trade Center imploding?
I'm not sure I remember the name. It came up at the point where I made it at that point, so I have to go back into the archives. I have very elaborate and very complicated names to my lectures. I'd like to say one thing. If this is going to go viral, I'd like to leave our number so that people can get in contact with us for some of our services. If they either want the Juice Plus, if they want our Juice Plus, if they want to join our university, if they would like a vaccination exemption package, if they would like a nutritional consultation, they could call 800-847-1291. Again, 800-847-1291. And about those who are interested in attending our UFO, the first Black UFO conference in New York, in Harlem, the capital of Black America, in the city of Harlem. It's at the National Black Theater this month, the 27th. Doors open at 2 p.m. It will be Brother Polite. There will be also Dr. Delbert Blair and myself. I will keynote the event. And you may call. There is a number for you to call. If you hold on for a minute, I can give you that number.
Yes, sir.
The number for those who are interested in getting tickets, you can get the tickets right there in Manhattan at 125th Street. It's Fifth Avenue and the corner of East 125th Street. The telephone number is called Nicholas Harlem, and it's 212-289-3628. Again, 212-289-3628. And then, of course, there's Nicholas Brooklyn, and there's 718-858-4400. Again, 718-858-4400.
The information, if you want certain information to talk to someone, the numbers are 347-600-7066 or 347-496-1022. And that's about it. The first annual UFO conference.
Dr. Phil, can you explain that vaccination exempt package a little bit before you go?
I will, if you not call me Dr. Phil anymore.
Oh, Dr. Phil. Dr. Valentine.
Dr. Valentine, I'm sorry.
I really don't like him.
He is a clown.
He unnerves me. The vaccination exemption package, we created that back in the mid-'80s, early '80s. It teaches people how to deal with vaccinations, or if they've had vaccinations, how to get past it, how to help heal their bodies. If they don't want the vaccinations for their children or themselves, we teach them that they can fill out the forms or do their own exemptions, or they can come under the auspices of our church, and we prepare all the paperwork for them. And we will write a church letter and help them to draw up, teach them how to put together their own affidavit. And again, that number is 800-847-1291.
And could you please send me that information to my page so I can continuously post it about that vaccination thing? Because I think a lot of people need to get away from letting their children shot.
We don't do that because that's kind of underground. We don't want to give any alert to what it is, and because they already know me in New York. I'm a poster child up there. They kind of wanted poster pretty much on me because I've been teaching people how not to take the vaccination, which takes money away from the pharmaceuticals, by the way. They get a kickback. The students get a kickback.
Sorry to interrupt you. Dr. Valentine, I work for a hospital where it's mandatory, to have to be vaccinated. So
that
would that form help?
State. Yeah, that depends on the state. There are certain states where you can go there. All the hospitals they don't come under the jurisdiction of the states because they've been privatized. Most of them is privatized. So you have to appeal to them based upon the law and see whether or not they'll accommodate you. There are laws governing those who are in hospital care, especially home cares. You can have vaccination exemptions. But those in certain hospitals, they don't want to start a trend. But there are state laws in certain states, like for instance Maryland, where they allow the hospital workers to use their religious exemptions. So I have to double check. That's what you're paying for. Actually, you're paying for the research.
Okay.
Wonderful. Well, let's say good night, everyone, and thank you for tuning in to Wake Up African People. And good night, Dr. Phil Valentine, and thank you for coming on to our show.
Good night,
Dr.
Valentine.
Thank you for the invitation.
Thank you.
We will be calling again.
For sure.
Hotel.
Kohl's Fall for You sale is going on now, and you can take an extra 15% off. Go to Kohls.com to download your savings pack. Then use it on top of already great savings, like 30 to 50% off the LC Lauren Conrad collection, and 40 to 50% off dress and casual shoes and boots for the family. Plus, everyone gets $10 Kohl's cash for every $50 spent. Right now at Kohl's. Don't miss it. Select styles, some exclusions apply. See store or Kohls.com for details.